Welcome to today's webcast, brought to you by DataVale. I'm Stephen Faig, Business Development Manager at Unisphere Research in Database Trends and Applications. I will be the host for today's broadcast. Our presentation today is titled, Building a Database Monitoring Tool Using Splunk. Before we get started, I want to explain how you can be a part of this broadcast. There will be a question and answer session. If you have a question during the presentation, just type it into the question box provided and click on the Submit button. We will try to get to as many questions as possible, but if your question has not been selected during the show, you will receive an email response to it. We will also have a polling question to start the event. Please take a moment to select your answer, and we will show the results live during the event. Plus, one lucky viewer today will win a $100 American Express gift card. The winner will be announced at the end of the event, so stay tuned to see if you've won. Now, to introduce our speaker for today, Chuck Ezell, Senior Applications Tuner at DataVale. For more information on our speaker today, you can click on the speaker's icon on the bottom of your console. Now to pass the event over to Chuck.
Thank you, Stephen. Welcome, everybody. I hope that today's webinar will be helpful for you. We are going to step through a little bit about Splunk. We're going to step through how to build some things, and I'm going to show you some ways to script some data into Splunk. And so as we get started, let me lay out a little bit of the agenda very quickly. We're going to talk a little bit about why we use Splunk to monitor databases, how to get started. I'm going to show you some real-world examples of some projects that we've done with Splunk and databases. We're going to talk a little bit about what kinds of data that you could actually collect, how to format data if you're going to be capturing data from custom locations, custom data, how to segregate that data and index it, and then getting the data actually into Splunk so that you can do searches and use some of the features built into Splunk for the UI to create visuals and all of the reporting and dashboards. So why Splunk? When we talk, everyone hears a lot about big data today. And when we think about big data, we think about three things: the volume of data, the velocity, and the variety of data. And with all of the databases, whether we're talking about SQL Server or Oracle or MySQL, you have all of these databases, but there's all this metadata that exists for all of the environments that we have, and there's a lot of it. It's being recorded very quickly, and it's different. It's all different. So how do we put it somewhere so that we can visualize it, we can monitor it, and we can make sense of it? Splunk is a great tool for that. And so although Splunk is not a monitoring tool per se, I'm going to show you how you can use it to monitor databases. I have a little quote here, and I'm just going to read a little bit of it at the very bottom from Max Slocum, Big Data. The art and practice of visualizing data is becoming ever more important in bridging the human-computer gap to mediate analytical insight in a meaningful way. So when we ask the question, why would we use Splunk? Splunk is great for unstructured data. It's great for big data. And it's great to monitor all this metadata that we have out there, that it's not consistent, that we're getting just a load of it, and we have a lot of it. So let's do a poll real quickly. I want to find out, those of you that are on, do you have Splunk at your company? If you take just a minute and respond to this poll, a lot of people have it. And a lot of people might not necessarily know how to use it. And a lot of the customers that we talk to have heard about Splunk, but they don't have it. So I hope that by the time we get to the end of this, that you'll have a better idea of what you could actually do with Splunk. And if you have it, then maybe you could get started doing something. However, if you don't have it, my suggestion would be to go to Splunk.com. Top right, you're going to see a free download button. If you click that button, it's going to ask you to create an account. You're going to download Splunk, and then one of the suggestions that I would have would be to spend a little time on their Splunk apps website. There's a lot of applications that they have, Splunk apps, that are really already tailored to SQL Server or Oracle or F5 or a lot of the technologies that are out there. People have already spent the time and energy to build these apps. So it might be a great way to get started. What you're going to need is potentially access to some type of logs. So you could use SFTP, for example, to connect to an application server, pull down Apache logs, or an Oracle alert log. You're going to need Windows, Linux, Mac, AIX, or a Sun environment particularly to run the Splunk interface. So whatever it is that you download, it will run on any of those particular environments. The storage space, I would suggest, if you're going to collect, for example, 5 gigs per day, and you're going to be looking at maybe about a month or so worth of data, you're probably going to at least need to start with about 200 gigs storage. So about 200 gigs storage space would be a great place to start. The free download is 500 megabytes. Now, if you go to dev.splunk.com, you could also sign up as a developer, and developers get about 5 gigs per day. At least it used to be. It could still be that way. So you can get more if you're actually going to be building an application. So let me show you some of the examples very quickly of some of the projects that we've done with Splunk. This is an example of an Apache node monitoring tool that we built, and we were having problems with the load balancer, and we were trying to figure out where the issue was with the load balancer because we knew that the Apache servers were not balancing the activity correctly. We took the logs, brought them right into Splunk. Splunk already understands Apache logs. Because of the prevalence of Apache itself, the logs are something that are inherently monitorable in Splunk. So we pulled those right in. It immediately began to index that data, and we were able to chart on that data very quickly and see where the activity fell within a certain time frame. We had a customer that needed SOX compliance monitoring across an Oracle cluster. And they actually had multiple Oracle clusters, and they had a manual process in place where they would run shell scripts, generate an Excel output for each server, and then take that Excel output and try to put all that together in a single report every month. What we did is we wrote scripts to pull that data out of the Oracle tables, passed that right to Splunk, and then began to monitor that across multiple rack environments in one place. And then we were able to build custom reports for searching and really began to build a beautiful dashboard that was very functional for SOX compliance monitoring. Monitoring application server status for things like garbage collection, how long does the garbage collection take, looking at all the exceptions that occur, the Apache errors. Those are things that are easily done with Splunk. It just takes a little time and energy, a little creativity. There was a tool that we built where we actually extracted data using some Perl scripts in Inmon, and we formatted that data and brought it right into Splunk and built a real-time Inmon monitoring tool. I don't know if you're familiar with Inmon or AIX, but Inmon is not the easiest tool to work with if you want to start visualizing CPU, for example. But with Splunk, it was not terribly hard to do. Looking at other items out of an Oracle database, we were able to script hot objects, what we call hot objects, the most actively accessed objects, tables and things. And then the bottom chart was an example of something where we were monitoring the top events over time, wait events, parallel reads, and all of that. The top 10 rack problem SQL IDs. This looks like a very simple chart. But in reality, if you have a rack cluster and you have each database in and of itself is running, is executing SQL, you have SQL statements that are running, and they might perform differently in different nodes in the rack cluster. So one of the things that we did was we captured all of that data from the Oracle alert logs, and we started looking at all of the problem statements and started commingling. Once we were able to put all of that data into one place in Splunk, we were very easily able to render a chart like this, and we could see the activity, like in the blue or the yellow, where the most problematic statements were occurring within a certain time frame across a rack cluster. This would work with SQL Server, or if you had clustered MySQL together, not complicated when it comes to Splunk. Splunk can actually be installed on your local client. So one of the things we've done for a customer in the past is we installed Splunk locally on their laptops, and we captured all of the activity that was going on within their network, passed that to Splunk, and we're able to correlate network activity. If you look at the bottom chart, there was a particular user that his laptop at a certain time of day would drop his connection. And so we were able to actually find that with Splunk very quickly. And then finally, looking at database health monitoring. I want to show you today how to build some charts like this, where we will write the SQL statement, we'll format the data, we'll get it into Splunk, and we'll build some charts like this and begin to build a dashboard. One of the interesting things about this left-hand chart, this column chart, these are SQL statements that run in an Oracle RAC environment. There are multiple execution plans for certain statements. If you see the middle column that's pink, brown, green, and purple, what you have is a single SQL execution that has multiple plan hashes. So not only does a visual like this give you the activity, how many times has this, or how long do these SQL statements run, not only does it give you that, but graphics like this also give you insight into the fact that that SQL execution plan probably is not using bind variables, it's probably unstable, and every time it runs, it might be doing hard parsing. There are a lot of outside things that you can glean from these reports. So very valuable. So let's take another poll question. What has been your major obstacle to building your own monitoring tool? So perhaps you've tried to build your own tool, whether you've tried to use Splunk or some other product. What have been the obstacles that you faced? I'll give you just a minute to answer that. Okay, so it looks like about 76% of you guys already have OEM Confio Foglight. So you already have a monitoring tool. That's great. So this is the thing that I find very interesting. Most of our customers are in the exact same boat you're in. So why would you choose Splunk to be a monitoring tool? If you already have something like OEM, if you already have Confio, if you already have Foglight, if you already have some other tool that monitors the database. Well, there are a lot of ways, a lot of items that you can capture with Splunk. So you're not just looking at the performance of SQL execution. A lot of times it's not just the SQL that's the problem. It could be the health of your tables. It could be the other sessions that are running. It could be the number of DB connections that you've got configured. So there are all kinds of things that you can look at, even on the outset. For example, Oracle alert logs, your database exception logs, concurrent requests. You can tail logs with utilities, API output. You can even monitor for code changes, processing times for different jobs that you're running, tracing logs, or even custom scripting data out with other utilities. So let's say that we wanted to script data out of a utility. We'll use a SQL statement for an example. Actually, let's look at the Apache logs first. I've already mentioned the fact that the Apache logs, that Apache is prevalent. Many people are familiar with it. Obviously, it's used everywhere. The logs are already recognized by Splunk. And if you look at the format of this log, there are only 4 lines that I've pulled out of a log. And you can see here this J session ID. There's a key right there, and there's a value. Splunk loves key-value pairs. And if you can format your data in a key value pair and you can get it into Splunk, it will save you a lot of time and energy. Now, you can use regular expressions to extract the data that you want and create custom fields on the fly with any type of flat file data in Splunk, but you'll save yourself a lot of time beforehand if you get the format right with custom data. So let me show you how we would do this. If you take a SQL script and you create the key value pairs, just like this, if this is an example at the bottom, database name, and then my Oracle DB. And here's an example of a SQL script that is just a basic script that we're monitoring the SQL plan. So we're looking for things like skip scans, full table scans, push predicates, other things that might or might not be problems, but we want to look and see what's happening, and we want to monitor for those things just in case we want to go back and take a look at the execution of the SQL, maybe the SQL execution plan itself. So we take this basic script and we begin to format the output into key value pairs. So if you look at the example at the bottom, I've taken SQL plan timestamp, that's our key field, and then the output that I'm rendering into the output script is the timestamp, formatting it, and then you essentially do that with your whole select portion. You can see here the format that I've got and where this falls, and actually that red square should be just a little bit lower. It should be as SQL plan info. So I'm concatenating all of these columns together into one line output. At that point, all you would need to do would be to take a SQL script like that, put it into a shell script, and then have cron run it at certain times of the day to produce your output. And this is what that script produces. SQL plan timestamp, you can see all the key values, database, the plan hash value, our full scans. You can see all of the data. Then we just push it right into Splunk. Splunk sees those key values, and it begins to index on all of it. So the same approach will work with any type of scripting. Okay, here's an example of a script that I wrote for AIX for IOStat. With IOStat, we can do the same key values output, and we essentially set it to run, generate the data, and we can forward that on, or we can consume that data manually. And I'm going to step you through how to do that very quickly here. So there are a lot of different ways to get data into Splunk. Files and directories. You can monitor on a TCP port. You can monitor on UDP ports for like syslog and other things. Or we can use scripts. So I'm going to show you how to take a custom script, output that data, and bring it into Splunk very quickly. But before I do that, I want to show you a little bit about how you ought to be planning. If you're going to be building a database monitoring tool, how do you plan for the data to be managed in a way that later it makes your searches easier, it makes your visualization easier. The best way to do this is to use indexes. So it's not like a DBA index that you would create on a table. It's actually a collection of small databases that are really subdirectories. And there are two files and a little bit of metadata in these indexes. It's raw data and index files. So why would we do this? Why would we use multiple indexes? Well, there's a lot of different reasons why. It distributes the activity. It segregates your data. It provides granular control over your events. It provides the ability to control your data visibility. You can segregate all of your field extractions. So let me show you what I'm talking about. Here is a logical diagram of how a Splunk setup might look. And if you look at the very top, you've got a search head. At the middle area, you've got indexes, and then right here, you've got particular servers, you've got a firewall, you've got a router. So let's say that you were capturing database sessions. You have a script that you're running, and you're capturing all of the sessions out of the database. You're scripting that out, and you're sending that on to a particular index because the DBAs want to monitor the number of sessions. So we can do that very easily by segregating and creating an index for the DBAs. And let's say that we wanted to actually script out of SQL Server all the jobs that have run. Well, the SQL Server DBAs, they don't want to see all the index data for Oracle people. They want to see their data, so we would create a SQL Server index. What if we wanted to create an index just for data for the e-commerce people? They want to see all the shopping cart problems. We could very easily segregate the data out by using indexes. So we could have a SQL Server index, we could have an Oracle index, we could have an index for our e-commerce people. We could even have a particular index defined for sales and managers. Okay, so how do we create an index? It's not hard. The top right of your interface, you're going to go to Settings. You're going to click Indexes under the Data category. You're going to get a screen like this. It's going to show you all of the indexes that already exist. You're going to click New, and you're going to be presented with a screen. So the first thing we need to do is we need to give our index a name. My suggestion would be to think about the name that you want to create your index. You make it contextual. This is an example of something where we're going to be collecting data from an Oracle database. So I'm going to create an index Oracle SQL Reporting. Now, if you look toward the bottom, there's a max size index that's measured in megabytes. Now, right now I'm working with the Splunk free. I don't want my index to grow too big. I only want to monitor so much, and I only have a limited space for collections. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that 500 megabytes, and I'm going to limit that to about 5,000. And then I click Save. And then it brings me right back to the screen that I started with. And I can see there I created the Oracle SQL Reporting. And in this example, you can also see where I created an index for MySQL, an index for Informix data, for SQL Server monitoring. And you can see where I changed the size of the data, of the actual index itself. And you can also see in that column that the current size is only 1 megabyte and that there are 0 events. Okay? So we've created our index. How do we get data into Splunk? I'm going to work off of the assumption right now that you've downloaded Splunk, that you have it on your laptop or a local machine that you have access to. And so what we're going to do is, instead of setting up forwarders and writing to syslogs and doing all of that, perhaps that's a session for another day. But today I'm going to show you how to use the Files and Directories option. So again, if you go to Settings, top right, and you click Data Inputs, you're going to be presented with a screen. You click Add Data, and you're going to select New. You'll have an option to browse for a file. And in this example, we're going to browse for a script output that I've already generated where I'm looking at the health of the indexes in an Oracle database. So you can see at the top area the full path to the particular output that I have. It's just a text file. And then if you click the checkbox, More Settings, you're going to get some more interesting options. You can actually define your host, and I'm defining a particular host field here for a customer Oracle EBS. I want that to be consistent and constant. You also have an option of selecting what index you want this data to go into. So you can see here I'm going to be selecting the Oracle SQL Reporting. So I want to take all of this data. I'm going to physically import it in. This is a manual process right now. It doesn't have to be this way. Like I said, TCP, UDP, there are a lot of ways to get data into Splunk. This is just a simple example of how you can do it right here, right now. So we're going to put that into the Oracle index, and you can see here it shows me the data input that I have. It shows me the source type that I've created, and of course the index that I'm putting the data into. Okay, so we have talked about why would we use Splunk, all of the different types of data that we might want to collect. We've talked about how to format data if you're doing custom scripts, key values. We've talked about how to segregate your data, how to create indexes, and now we've stepped through how to get everything into Splunk in a manual way. I want to show you a little bit about now how to do some searches, how to use the interface, the search interface. This is really where a lot of the power of Splunk comes into play. Splunk has some very, very unique and powerful search features, and I'm going to step you through the fields, the key values. I'm going to show you some of the search functions, and then I'm going to step you through some charting, reporting, and aggregation. So here's your search screen, and if you look on the left-hand side, you'll see all of your fields. These are essentially the keys, right, the key fields that we've created in our script. And these might be automatically detected from an Apache log or some other type of log that's already in a key value structure. There might already be regular expressions stored in Splunk that Splunk is already prepared to consume particular logs. And it will automatically begin to collect that data into that field. So if you notice on the left-hand side, you've got client IP. And there's a little number next to it. That 14 is the number of unique values that we have for that. So on the right side, this is our log data. And I'll point you to the time column. Everything that's brought into Splunk is brought in as a timed event. So it's a date, time, and that way we can search across a certain window of time. It allows us to segregate data in unique ways. The top right provides us our search features. So we have presets where we can monitor data in real time. 30-second windows, 5-minute windows, 30-minute windows. And then sort of in the middle of that area, you have a big box that gives you some relative search time dates. You can look at today. You can go back to a year to date, last 15 minutes, last 4 hours. Very quick, very clickable stuff. So let's talk a little bit about the search language. So we're talking about monitoring databases, but the search language that Splunk has is not a SQL-like language. Okay, there are some similarities, but it's not SQL. So there are some unique ways to handle searching. Obviously, you have the wildcard. So this is an example of me searching for any index that exists in Splunk. I can use the pipe feature like you would typically do in a terminal. You know, if I wanted to pipe something in, I could use the send mail feature. So I could search on any index. I could pipe send mail to myself at datavel.com. So that would actually capture all of that output, the search result, and email it to me. There's a convert feature where you can actually convert the data on the fly. There are fields that you can, filters that you can use to add fields or remove fields in your search. There's a way you can define source types explicitly, or you could use the wildcard. Remember, we talked about the index health source type that I created when I brought my data in. We can use time chart. The time chart function actually leads to some great visuals. So if we did a time chart count by host, that would give us some pretty cool charts. We could use the add totals and sum data. We can do counts. This is an example of chart count by field name. We can pipe in clusters. So this would be kind of like the way we would do a group by. So any field search, we would do something like a field name equals. Of course, the example here would be the wildcard. So as you begin to search in your search box in Splunk, it will give you suggestions. You notice here it already popped up and it already saw all the indexes that I've already created. And I'm selecting index Oracle SQL reporting. So all of my searches in my examples from here on will be anything that I've imported into that one index. So I'm explicitly searching on that index first. So what about fields that we've created that are custom fields that don't automatically show up? There is a way we can add those to our shortcuts on the left. And again, you know, I'll point you to the left-hand side, the selected fields. If you scroll all the way down, there's an option that you can click, and you can select the field itself. It pops up a little box, and it gives you some quick shortcuts. The top 10 values. In this example, there are actually only 10 values, but it would give you the top 10 values that exist for that field, the events with the particular field itself, you know, shortcuts to reports, essentially. So if I wanted to add some fields that don't already exist, I could scroll down to the bottom, and there's an option that I can click that pops up this window. And then it shows me all of the fields that Splunk has found but might not be presenting to me. You can see here in this example I have tune plan object name, tune plan operation, tune plan options. These are ones that I've checked in this GUI, and I want to add those to my shortcuts on the left. Once I click the ones that I want and I select OK, it brings me back to the same screen that I was already in, and I can see now the options that I've added: tune plan object name, operation options, and timestamp. So let's talk a little bit about reporting. So like I said, with Splunk, the real power in Splunk is the search language, learning the search language, learning how to manipulate the data. You know, you can actually take regular expressions and do raw regular expression searches right in the search box. So there's some powerful things you can do. If you know regular expressions, then you're going to feel right at home in doing some amazing things with Splunk. So let's do this. Let's look at everything beyond the events. Right? We've really only looked at the event tab, and everything we've talked about to this point has been kind of event related, but there's some other tabs in this interface. So if you click the statistics tab, it gives you a very quick summary of your SQL, of your search. So if you look at the search that I have, you notice that the search has changed. At the top, I'm searching on the Oracle SQL Reporting Index, and then I'm piping in top tune plan options, and then I'm just asking it to limit to 100. Now, I don't have 100 in there. It looks like there was only 8 or 10. So, and it gives me my count automatically. So that's a quick way to do a search, to get the statistics, and then very quick to get me my visualization. Splunk automatically recommends particular types of visuals that I can use. It's telling me that the pie chart, the bar chart, and the column chart are probably the best options, mostly because of the data that I returned, right? But if I had a single value, I could use the single value option. I could use the radial gauge. I could use the filter, the marker. You know, there's some other things that might be really cool, and might be some other visuals that I could add to my dashboard. That's where we're going. So we've got the pie chart. Here's the column chart, the same data in a column view, the same data in a bar view. So on the right-hand side, there's some other features that I think are really, really cool and very helpful. Let's look at the first one, and it's the share option. If you click that option, we've got our pie chart, and let's say that I wanted to send that out to someone. I could share this. I could actually copy-paste that URL into an email and send it to someone. I could bookmark it, and then I could come back to that at any time. There's a way that I can actually export data right out of this visual. I can export it as CSV, an Excel spreadsheet, a PDF. There's a lot of different formats. So you've got an export feature. You've got a print feature. Let's say that I've created my visual and I want to print it. I want to take it to a meeting real quick. It not only gives you the visual, but it also gives you the statistical reporting at the bottom. So very quick, very easy things. If you are at first, planning your data, capturing the things that you want to capture, getting that format and structure the way that you want it, and then getting it into Splunk and monitoring on it, you have tools that are very quick and easy to use. You can actually save this out as a dashboard. I want to step through a little bit of that next. So let's do this. Let's talk a little bit about dashboards. Why would we create a dashboard? We've got a visual. We can email that pie chart link to somebody. I mean, there's a lot of ways to get to our data, but why would we put it all in a dashboard? Well, maybe that's an obvious question. The answer is obvious. There are multiple charts in one place. We can monitor multiple data sources from one varied location. But more interestingly, we could create segregated views for very specific audiences. We could create central reporting interfaces for launching other reports and other searches. For example, you could create a dashboard that would really be the launching place for all of the other reports. With Splunk, the dashboard interface is very extensible. It's HTML and XML. You can create links to external resources to SharePoint, to other websites. So here's an example of a very simple dashboard, and I'm going to show you how to create this. The top right, we've got our visual, same search that we've already done. We're just going to go right back to it. If I click Save As and I go to Dashboard Panel, it's going to pop up an option for me. And let's take a look at these options here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select New, because you're doing two things. We don't yet have a dashboard. This is a new instance of Splunk. So we don't yet have a dashboard. So I'm going to create a new dashboard. I'm going to name it. And then I'm actually going to take the panel, this pie chart that I have, and I'm going to make it the first chart on the dashboard. So I'm going to give that panel a name. This is the Execution Plan Operations. And then I'm going to save it. It immediately gives me an option. I can cancel out of this, or I could just go right to the dashboard. So I'm going to click View Dashboard, and that takes me to the dashboard that I've just created. And that's how hard, I'm kidding, that's how easy it really is with Splunk. So the search, once you learn the search language, there's some amazing things you can do. So what we've done is we've stepped through how to actually create this visual. So I want to show you an example of how we would then add more visuals, because this is the process. There's not any other, complicated way that you have to do it. You just keep doing this and you can build all kinds of amazing dashboards. So again, we can then go to Edit. Oh, actually, I'm ahead. Let me show you a little bit about how to edit the dashboard that we've already created. I'm going to show you a little bit about the kind of what's behind the dashboard. If you click the Edit option up at the top and you go to Source, so this is just an XML structure in this basic dashboard. You can convert the dashboard to HTML, and you can create HTML forms. You can modify. Let's say that later on we decided, I really don't want the pie chart. I want a bar chart. You can go into edit mode, click the visual, and then you can modify that to a column, to a bar, and then save it. It's very easy to do. You can change your time frames. Let's say that we wanted this dashboard to be a real-time dashboard, and I only wanted to see everything that's happening within 60 seconds. Then I might change that time to a 1-minute window. So how do we add to the existing dashboards? Again, we just go to the Save As feature, the top right. I'm going to select Dashboard Panel, assuming we have a different graphic now, have a different visual, but this time, instead of selecting New, I'm going to select Existing. And then when I do that, it's going to give me an option to select the dashboard that already exists. Now, remember, our other dashboard is Oracle Monitoring. So this one, I'm going to select that dashboard because I want this new visual to go into the dashboard we just created. I can name the panel, or I can go right to the visual. So here I've created a second panel on my dashboard. There's some other nice little features, when you roll your mouse over the pie charts and the columns and the other graphs that you have, it will give you statistical information, the actual values, little pop-up options, and so let's do this very quickly. Let's do another poll question. Have you used Splunk to monitor your database? Like I said, Splunk in and of itself is not, a database monitoring tool. It's not a Confio. It's not an OEM. And a lot of times what we've done with Splunk is we have not tried to replicate the feature set of these other products. We've used it to supplement, and to kind of come behind and build upon the things that are missing in the other products. So good. I'm glad people are encouraged and inspired to try. You can see it's not complicated to get started. And there are those who didn't even know you could do this. So that's great. So I've stepped through how to collect the data, how to format your scripts, and if you'll do the key value pairs, that's really the way to go. if you know regular expressions and you can pull in other types of logs like Oracle alert logs or other exception logs that you might have, log4j, log4net, a lot of those logs Splunk might already recognize. The format and structure of those might already be brought in. So let's look at some of the things that we actually did not talk about. There are a lot of things that we skipped. We skipped talking about permissions. Ways, we've talked about how we can create different indexes, but there are ways that you can segregate that data and you can manage who can do what, who can modify the dashboards, who can see the data, who can search on the indexes. So permissions are something we don't have time to talk about, but it's a very powerful feature in Splunk. The forwarders, whether you're talking about TCP or whether you're talking about writing across UDP and syslog, so very powerful things you can do and really not only make the whole process more intelligent, but you can secure the process. So, if you're concerned about connecting to a database, maybe writing a shell script that invokes SQL Plus, that runs a statement and generates a flat file output, and then somehow it's brought over to Splunk. There are ways to secure that process, and UDP, writing to syslogs, there are ways to do that very intelligently and very securely. We didn't talk about the Splunk apps, but I didn't mention it prior. The Splunk apps are something that someone else has already spent the time and energy to build it. There are Google Maps Splunk apps. There are F5 Splunk apps. There are Oracle apps. There are SQL Server, MySQL monitoring tools. There are things right now out of the box that you could take and implement. There are ways to create an application, a Splunk app of your own dashboard. Let's say that you spent a lot of time and energy writing your Splunk dashboard, and you wanted to take that and turn that into some type of app yourself. There are ways that you can do that, and Splunk gives you all the tools that you need. So we didn't even mention alert reporting. And alert reporting would be something that you can do very easily. Let's say that you did generate your charts, and you had charts that you wanted to monitor on, and you had a dashboard. There are ways for you to actually generate these charts and attach them to an email and have those emailed out at a certain time every day. And let's say that every morning you wanted to come in, you've built your dashboard, you wanted the managers to get the DBA reports. There would be very easily a way for you to do that with Splunk. Build the dashboard, have it attach a PDF to the email, and send it out. So some of the other things that we skipped very quickly here. We talked about big data. We talked about Splunk being a great tool for visualizing big data. And there are some tie-ins that Splunk has to Hadoop. And there are actually APIs that you can use to write data into Splunk and pull data out of Splunk. So let's say that you spent all the time and energy to put all kinds of metadata into Splunk, and then you wanted to bring that into another custom application that you already have, Salesforce maybe. There are ways that you can do that with Splunk APIs. They very recently added the BugSense mobile features, so now Splunk has a lot of mobile-related features that you can even explore. So, not to belabor the point that we've really only touched the surface of what you can do with Splunk. There are an immense number of things that can be done, and there are all these things that we skipped, and perhaps we can follow up with another webinar and drill down into some of these other features. But I want to open it up for questions, and I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. And if you have any questions, I'd love to answer, if I can, any questions you might have.
Thank you, Chuck, for that great presentation. Now, before we move into the Q&A session, we would appreciate everyone taking a moment to fill out the survey that's popping up on your screen right now. And at this point, I will dig into the first question from our viewers today. And that first question, Chuck, is can you schedule dashboards to be run and sent over an email?
You can. Yeah, certainly. You can render a dashboard as a PDF and have that scheduled a certain time every day, and it will automatically run. You basically set up SMTP with your Splunk server, and a lot of what's already been done is automated, and it's really a matter of just clicking through the interface and configuring it.
Understood. And as a kind of a follow-up to that, can you run Splunk in the background and simply have it send alerts based on thresholds and values?
That's a good question. When you say background, I assume you mean like a background process. And essentially, you could set up Splunk to monitor data, and Splunk can monitor that. You can configure all of your alerts, and you don't necessarily, once it's all configured and running, you don't have to build dashboards. Let's say that you wanted to set up monitoring, you can do that and not try to go and create a bunch of visuals, but you're just monitoring data, and you can create all of your alerts. And you don't have to visit Splunk to do searches or features unless you unless you have some type of diagnostic situation where you want to kind of go back and look at logs. So yeah, you could essentially create it where it would run essentially in the background, and it's forwarding all the data on and creates all of your alerts and will notify you if it comes into a problem.
Understood. Thanks. So question from a new viewer. Can you use the Splunk DB connector instead of using a shell script?
The thing about the Splunk DB connector is you just have to keep in mind that when you use the Splunk DB connector, it requires certain permissions. Okay, so you're adding an application, essentially giving it permissions to your database, and which, if you've created the user accounts with the read access that you want, then you've secured it to best, that you can. The only thing that I have seen that concerns me about that is that feature does allow ad hoc queries. So you're opening the database up to people writing their own SQL statements. So again, maybe that's not a problem in the way that you're configuring Splunk, but you want to kind of keep that in mind as you're going into it.
Understood. Our next question, are there Splunk apps for Oracle database monitoring?
There are not full-featured applications or apps, Splunk apps that you can download that are ready to go for Oracle monitoring that I have seen. Thus, that's really what, the reasons why we ended up writing our own scripts is because there isn't anything out there that I've seen that really does a good job of monitoring Oracle databases.
Gotcha. Does Splunk only run on Windows, or can it be used for any operating system?
You can run it on any operating system. You can now, if you're talking about actually installing and running Splunk, the Splunk engine itself will run on Windows, Linux, AIX, Sun. There's certain versions of Linux, I believe, but if you go to the Splunk.com website and look at the specifications, on the download page, it will tell you all the different options that you'll have. But yeah, it's not limited to Windows. I'm sorry, by the way, I'm also running this on this whole example. All the stuff that I built was on a Mac, so we'll run on a Mac too.
Oh, fantastic. So we have a question as well as a request. The question is Splunk freeware, and the request is compare it with R.
Compare it with what? Awk?
R.
Okay, I'm not familiar with that tool. But it's not freeware. There is a free version of Splunk that you can go to Splunk.com and download. That version is limited to about 500 megs per day. If you want to sign up for a developer license, they do increase that consumption level, I think, to about 5 gigs per day. It is limited with a certain time frame. So, with the goal really is, as a developer, they're going to give you more bandwidth to consume every day because you're going to be testing, you're going to be building things. And so the goal is within a certain time frame, you're going to kind of have what you need developed. But yeah, it's not a freeware product, but the 500 megabyte, I will say, is not limited. So they haven't extracted features, they haven't turned things off. Splunk free, the 500 megabyte limit per day is the same Splunk as just regular Splunk that you download and pay by bandwidth.
Okay, excellent. So you pretty much retain all of the full features that you would get with the paid version.
Yeah.
And R is it's a open source statistical language for computing. So I'm not sure what type of comparisons we really could draw to that, but it was a request.
I got you. Yeah, so that's maybe more related to big data and some of the Google projects of MapReduce and things. Yeah, so Hadoop and so I'm not really familiar with that, but if I were to compare it, I guess I would really need to know more about that.
Absolutely. We can always return to that at some other point.
Okay.
Our next question, Chuck, can you run activity against the monitored database / application?
Can you read that again, Stephen?
Sure. Can you run activity against the monitored database / application?
Can you monitor activity? You mean like in real time?
You know what? The question was, can you run activity against the monitored database / application?
Oh, okay. I follow you. I think I understand the question, meaning is it a asynchronous process maybe where the examples that I've shown really are a way for us to read data out of a database or out of particular logs that already exist. So there's not necessarily a way for us to inject SQL or inject code into an application environment using Splunk with the examples I've shown. Now, Splunk is so open-ended and so really full-featured that I'm sure that there are ways that you could, if you wanted to find ways to test and debug and use this for, load balancing or regression testing or whatever, then I'm sure that there are ways that you could, that you could try to do that. Hopefully that answered the question.
I think so. All right, our next question, are your foils available?
Yes, they are.
We'll send them out.
Yeah, we can send them out after the presentation.
Okay, fantastic. And another question, is there support for building a solution using Splunk, not just using it?
The first thing I would suggest would be when you create your account on Splunk, there is a big user group on Splunk. If you go to the dev.splunk.com, my suggestion would be get involved with all of the folks. Typically, the personalities of people who use Splunk are very open. They love to help other people. And so if you post a question, there will be probably several people that would be willing to answer that question. We do help people with Splunk, implementing Splunk and configuring Splunk. I've shown you some projects that we've done, and so data will be available to help people as well.
Fantastic. Our next question, is the limit 500 megabytes per day or 5 gigabytes per day?
The limit on the free version is 500 megabytes per day.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you. And we have another question. Can you use this solution to run TPCC/TPCH?
I'm not sure. That's a good question. Yeah, we'll have to get back to you on that. I don't know right offhand.
Okay, we'll do a little digging and we can answer that via email. Okay, our next question, Chuck. Once I build the tool, how hard is it to support?
Well, that's a good question. So, the time and energy to build it, it does require some planning. And if you spend a little time up front thinking about how you want to segregate your data, how you want to collect your data, all of that really plays into how easy or how difficult it's going to be to support it. You can make it as complicated as you want, but the more complicated you make it, the more that you have to support it. So that's a great question, and it really kind of, I think, leads you back to being wise about how you plan, how you prepare, and how you build the dashboard. In my experience, following the tools that you're given with Splunk and not veering too far from the well-trodden path, if you will, does save a lot of time in supporting it later. Now inevitably, though, you run into situations where you need to do something unique. Possibly no one's done it before, and you need to be able to do it, and it's going to require a unique situation. So as you go into that, you just need to plan for how you're going to support it later.
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Exceptions always come up pretty much. Well, usually. Yep. Okay, so our next question is, Chuck, is there a way for Splunk to run queries on the database rather than exporting an output from the actual database?
Yeah, the DB Connect tool allows you to run queries on the database. It will connect to the database, and you can build queries and run those directly in the database right from Splunk.
Fantastic. And another question. WebLogic console logs can also be used in Splunking?
Yes, they sure can, definitely. The only thing you want to consider when you're looking at console logs from WebLogic is the file structure itself. You're going to end up generating flat files, or you're going to end up generating, or you're going to be forwarding data on, and the data itself might not already be in a format that Splunk will recognize. That's not a problem. You just have to have regular expression knowledge to extract the data that you want. So you literally can consume anything if you have the time and energy to extract the data that you want out of it.
Understood. Now, is there a limit to the size the database has to be to use Splunk?
No. You can connect this and monitor very small databases or great big databases, huge clustered environments. As a matter of fact, some of the examples that I showed were ones that we were monitoring large Oracle rack environments. So they can be massive. They can be very small. But I will say this. The reason why I wanted to present a method of scripting data out is sometimes, for example, if you're collecting, so the WebLogic console logs, there could be a tremendous amount of data that you're consuming, right? A lot of data. So we might only want a small portion of that. Or we might be limited to only consuming so much per day. So we run into a problem then when we're consuming a tremendous amount of data and we're not using it. Scripting it from a custom perspective, you can get exactly what you want when you want. So, so it really doesn't matter what size database you're connecting to. What it really comes down to is what is it that you're collecting and how are you collecting it, and how much do you want to collect?
Understood. With regard to restricting data or dashboards to different user groups, are there ways to restrict users from seeing your data in Splunk?
There are ways that you can keep people in indexes, and you can actually even integrate LDAP. You have a heavily used LDAP environment. At your company, you can integrate LDAP and give people permissions that way, provisioning, control very easily. So, yeah, there's definitely ways you can keep people from searching on certain data fields.
Okay, fantastic. That's actually all the time we have for questions today. We apologize that we were unable to get to all the questions, but as I stated earlier, all questions will be answered via email. I'd like to thank our speaker today, Chuck Gazelle, Senior Applications Tuner at DataVale. If you would like to review this presentation or send it to a colleague, please use the same URL that you used for today's live event. It will be archived for 90 days. Plus, you will receive an email tomorrow once the archive is posted. As we stated earlier, just for participating in today's event, someone would win a $100 American Express gift card. And the winner today, drum roll, is Sean Hitchens. Sean, we will be in touch via email so you can claim your prize. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thank you, Stephen.